Now, some time has passed since we got the announcement of Cataclysm Classic, and recently we had another campfire chat with the Classic WoW team to talk about all things Classic WoW, including Season of Discovery, Current Wrath, and also some aspects of Cata, to once again spark the debate surrounding the controversial expansion. As there's been a lot of chat about Cataclysm Classic since its announcement, with the majority of overwhelming responses captured in the essence of one big meh. And then there are people who are looking forward to going through Cataclysm once again, whilst there are some people who never even got to try it in the first place. So I think it's fair to say that the response to Cata Classic has been incredibly mixed, and nowhere near the positive response that Vanilla, BC, or Wrath of the Lich King got throughout their announcements. And personally to me this was no surprise, as Cata is often pinpointed as part in WoW's timeline, where the game went on the decline in terms of subscribers, and to some also a decline in the state of gameplay alongside the reimagining of the vanilla world. So it's fair to ask, will Cataclysm Classic be a success or not? Firstly, I think we need to nail on the fact that a lot of people will likely be there for launch regardless. For those who want to relive the expansion, those who want to experience it for the first time, and those who are just curious about their own negative feelings towards the expansion, with me being in that last group. From Cataclysm's first announcement back in the day when it was the new fresh expansion, I thought Deathwing looked great and the trailer was exciting, but at the time I still couldn't place my finger on it, as it seemed so alien compared to the past two expansions somehow, which is a very, very weird note considering Burning Crusade literally took us to an alien planet. But regardless, I am a Wrath baby and my WoW journey started at the start of Wrath of the Lich King, so I wasn't really sure what to expect, I suppose, as this was my first new expansion reveal as a WoW player. Yet still I was expecting something to do with maybe the Burning Legion or a direct link to the old gods, a point where Deathwing's link to such lore aspects only became clearer throughout the playthrough of Cataclysm. So for me, Cata straight from the bat was a bit confusing lore-wise, and throughout the expansion, it didn't really become any clearer, as I wasn't too sure what Deathwing was actually doing, a point echoed by many others in the community since. I think also the drop-off in players through original Cata is affecting my anticipation of Cata Classic massively, as alongside connecting to it just being a confusing time storyline-wise, I remember lots of my friends also quitting the game throughout Cata, regardless of what anyone wants to say about Dungeon Finder or looking for raid being added and breaking down the community aspect of the game. For the majority of my community, it was just an aspect that the game didn't make sense anymore, nor feel what World of Warcraft was actually about. Potential risk which comes when you make massive changes to a world where the world is the main character, or when you no longer add to classes such as extending talent trees, but you just change the way classes now play, making it almost questionable if Cataclysm is even classic WoW. And I think the final point that makes me uneasy is the fact that we know we are building up to Dragon Soul and that horrific final two-part Deathwing fight, which is probably the biggest letdown in WoW history in terms of a final boss fight. I mean, the fact I enjoy the fight in Aberrus that we get in Dragonflight with Neltharion more than the main final fight in Cataclysm we get, and consider that a better hint of a Deathwing fight, involving his human form and a full-sized metal-heavy Ashkander, and then a glimpse of the void corruption that had taken over, is kind of testament to how disappointing the Cata end fight actually was. And I think maybe a build-up to that fight alone, which is a pretty disappointing conclusion to the expansion, that could have potentially been the best raid of all time, is enough to put many players off, unlike how we had seen Burning Crusade build up to fights with Illidan and Kil'jaeden, or how Wrath builds up to fighting the actual Lich King for the entire expansion and then successfully carries out your fight with Arthas in a way that reflects both great in-game mechanics and a storyline throughout the fight. I mean, he literally kills the entire raid, begins to turn you into the Scourge, and Tyrion has to beg the light for a mass res, and then shatters Frostmourne, and you finish off the Lich King while the souls of Frostmourne swirl around him. It's pretty decent. For Deathwing, I thought the spine of Deathwing was an interesting idea, and it was quite cool, but to me it wasn't a boss fight, it's something you do in between boss fights, maybe as a trash mechanism, or a manner in which you would navigate the raid to get around to actually fighting Deathwing. But then to kill him, we just trim his toenails and let Thrall and the aspects finish him off. I feel like when Thrall hits him with that golden version of Captain America's shield, that we could have easily forced Deathwing into his human form. We fight him there. Now, much like when the Lich King just kills everyone as the last part of the encounter, we could have had the madness of Deathwing where he's gone fully insane and corrupt in the Maelstrom as the final bit of encounter after kind of beating him up a little. Not a perfect idea, but it took me about 3 seconds to brainstorm, and I'm sure Blizzard could have done far better, right guys? As we did see some cool features like this during Cataclysm, such as Ragnaros standing out of the lava pool and growing some legs on heroic Firelands. However, besides my feeling towards the final final encounters of Dragon Soul, which I stand by, as it's not really a fitting end from the player's perspective in my opinion. It's worth noting that the other points I raised are feelings of the past connected to my original playthrough of Cataclysm at the time. So I am genuinely curious to see how Cataclysm will play through from a classic standpoint, and if the content will now connect with me in any way, as there were parts of the expansion which I loved, such as the Worgen starting area in Gilneas, aspects of underwater leveling zones and dungeons, the first tiers of raids, the return of Zul'Gurub, as well as Firelands, which amongst all the angst at the time were actually really great content. And it's fair to say that a lot of the tier sets and gear throughout Cataclysm looked pretty awesome, and it's these highlights that do make me believe Cataclysm Classic can be a success. Not that it will be one, just that it could be one, and might retain a decent amount of players to get a fairly good community to whoever decides to stick around and see it out, potentially being Cataclysm back with a more favourable view on things. However, I think the main question lurking in everyone's minds revolves around asking, should Cata Classic be happening in the first place? As there's a debate that if it's even Classic anymore, as WoW's main storyline finished with Arthas, as well as Wrath being the last time the old world was, well, the old world. Yet it is happening. Personally, I will return to Cata Classic with an open mind. Far more open than my pretty negative opinion of that expansion in the past. And I'm interested to see how Cata will fare with players in general, as it's pretty much the first test that might disturb the waters of the Classic fanbase, who have been pretty happy with Vanilla, BC, Wrath, Hardcore, and now Season of Discovery. And it also begs the question, where does Classic stop? Are we now going to revisit Pandaria? And on the horizon of that, lots of Draenor. But who knows? I'll be there for Cata and eager to see what develops throughout its tenure. So do let me know if you plan on playing Cata Classic, or if you think it's an absolute inhumane injustice to the Classic fanbase. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you're new here. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.